Every morning followed the same quiet rhythm. The kettle clicked off. Sunlight stretched across the kitchen floor. She slung her worn sweater over the chair and reached for her keys, already thinking about errands and the long day ahead. It was ordinary, comfortingly so, until she noticed the dog hadn't moved. He sat near the door, perfectly still, eyes locked on the old backpack resting against the wall. His ears were alert, but his body trembled slightly, like he was holding something in. When she called his name, he didn't respond. When she stepped toward the door, he stood abruptly and placed himself between her and the bag, letting out a low, uncertain whine. Her heart tightened. "What is it?" she murmured, half smiling, half nervous. She nudged the backpack aside with her foot, but the dog reacted instantly, barking once, sharp and pleading, then pressing his nose against the fabric as if begging it not to move. His tail stayed low. His eyes never left hers. She laughed softly, brushing it off. Maybe a mouse. Maybe a smell from outside. But as she reached again, his paw landed on her wrist, gentle, deliberate, almost human. She froze. The air felt heavier now, charged with something she couldn't name. The dog backed away, then sat, staring at the backpack like it held a secret only he understood. Her smile faded. A strange ache bloomed in her chest as she slowly knelt down, fingers hovering over the zipper. Moments later, everything changed. Before we continue, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The house woke slowly. Not all at once, but in layers. First, the soft click of the kettle shutting off by itself. Then the hum of the refrigerator settling back into silence. Morning light slid through the kitchen window, pale and careful, touching the floor like it didn't want to disturb anything. Sarah stood at the counter, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't lifted yet. The coffee smelled warm, familiar. Outside, a delivery truck passed, tires whispering against the street. It was just another weekday. That's what it felt like. She glanced at the clock. Still on time. Good. Her old sweater hung over the chair, one sleeve nearly brushing the floor. The backpack rested where it always did, leaned against the wall near the door, scuffed at the bottom, zipper half open from yesterday. Everything exactly where it should be. Almost. "Come on, buddy," Sarah said softly. She reached for her keys. Normally that was enough. Normally, Cooper would already be at her side, tail wagging, nails clicking lightly on the tile, ready for his short walk before she headed out. He loved mornings, loved routines, loved knowing what came next. But today, he hadn't moved. Sarah paused, keys dangling from her fingers. Cooper sat a few feet from the door, perfectly still. His body was upright, alert, but not tense in the usual excited way. His ears were forward, his head slightly tilted, his gaze fixed on the backpack. Not her. The bag. "Hey," she said, smiling despite herself. "What's got you frozen?" No response. She took a step closer. Cooper's tail stayed low. Not tucked, just uncertain. His chest rose and fell a little faster than normal. Sarah felt a small ripple of unease, the kind you usually ignore. The kind that comes and goes without meaning anything at all. "Did you hear something?" she asked. She listened. Nothing. No scratching. No noise from the hall. No sounds from outside beyond the distant morning traffic. She nudged the backpack lightly with her foot. That's when Cooper reacted. He stood up so fast his nails scraped the tile. A single bark, sharp, restrained. Then a low whine vibrating in his chest. "Hey, hey," Sarah said, startled. "Easy." She laughed, but it came out thinner than she meant it to. "Since when are you scared of a bag?" Cooper stepped between her and the backpack. Not aggressively, just deliberately. His body formed a quiet barrier. His head dipped, nose brushing the fabric of the bag. He sniffed once, twice, then pressed his muzzle against it like he was holding it in place. Sarah's smile faded. That was new. She crouched slightly, lowering her voice. "What are you doing?" Cooper didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the bag. His ears flicked back, listening. Waiting. Sarah reached out and grabbed the strap. Cooper's paw came up. Not fast. Not forceful. It rested gently on her wrist. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat before she realized it had. Cooper had never done that before. Never put a paw on her like that. Not unless he was asking for something. Not unless he was scared. She slowly let go of the strap. "Okay," she whispered. Cooper eased back but didn't relax. He sat again, posture rigid, gaze steady. The low whine returned, softer now. Almost pleading. Sarah straightened, heart beating a little faster. This was ridiculous, she told herself. Dogs notice smells. Sounds. Mice in the walls. Something spilled on the bag. That had to be it. Still, she knelt down beside the backpack. The fabric felt cold under her fingers. She noticed the faint scent of old paper and something else. Antiseptic, maybe? She frowned, trying to remember the last time she'd even opened it. Probably yesterday. Or the day before. She pulled the bag toward her. Cooper leaned forward instantly, nose inches from the zipper, eyes wide. His tail didn't move at all. "Cooper," she said quietly. "It's okay." He didn't believe her. She could see it in his posture, the way his weight shifted forward, ready but restrained. The way his breathing changed. Shorter. Focused. Like he was bracing for something only he could sense. Sarah rested her hand on the zipper. The kitchen felt different now. Still quiet but heavier. Like the air had thickened without warning. She thought about ignoring it. About standing up, grabbing her keys, and leaving just like every other day. But Cooper didn't move. He stared at the backpack with an intensity that made her chest ache. There was no fear in his eyes, just urgency. Purpose. "Trust me," his body seemed to say. Her fingers curled around the metal tab. She took a breath. Slow. Careful. And pulled. The zipper slid open with a soft, ordinary sound. Cooper stopped whining. He sat perfectly still. And Sarah leaned forward, peering into the backpack, unaware that the small, quiet moment she was standing in had already passed. Moments later, everything changed. The backpack stayed where it was. Open now but untouched. Sarah didn't reach inside right away. She couldn't explain why. Something in her hesitated. A soft resistance she didn't want to name. She straightened instead, smoothing her sweater, listening to the quiet hum of the house returning. Cooper didn't move. He sat beside the bag, eyes fixed on the opening. His breathing was steady now, but his posture remained alert, like a guard who'd finally been relieved but wasn't leaving his post. Sarah cleared her throat. "Okay," she said lightly. "You win." She stood, picked up her keys, and headed out the door with Cooper at her side, though he glanced back twice before crossing the threshold. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The next morning the same thing happened. Same light slipping across the floor. Same kettle clicking off. Same backpack leaning against the wall. And Cooper sitting in the exact same spot. Still. Focused. Watching. Sarah paused mid-step. "You're kidding," she murmured. Cooper didn't react to her voice. His ears twitched, but his gaze stayed locked on the bag. His tail lay relaxed against the floor, not tense, not wagging, just present. Waiting. She approached slowly this time. Nothing changed. She crouched beside him, studying his face. The fur around his eyes had gone gray over the years, but his gaze was sharp, intelligent. Grounded. This wasn't anxiety. It wasn't fear. It was vigilance. "Buddy," she whispered. "What are you doing?" Cooper finally looked at her then, just for a second. His eyes softened. Then he looked back at the backpack. Sarah sighed and stood up. "All right," she said. "Have it your way." She stepped around the bag and headed out. The day passed. Meetings. Traffic. Errands. The kind of busy that leaves you tired without feeling accomplished. When she returned home that evening, the house smelled faintly of dust and detergent. Quiet. Too quiet. "Cooper," she called. He came trotting in from the living room, happy, relaxed, tail wagging, until he reached the hallway. Then he stopped, turned, and sat, facing the backpack. Sarah set her purse down slowly. You've got to be kidding me. She watched him for a long moment. The way he positioned himself wasn't random. He angled his body slightly toward the door, like he was guarding both the bag and the exit, like he was making sure nothing and no one crossed a line. That night, she moved the backpack into the bedroom. She didn't tell herself why. She didn't need to. Cooper followed. He lay on the floor beside the bed, chin resting on his paws, eyes still open, watching the bag from the corner of his vision. Sarah turned off the light. Sleep didn't come easily. The next day, and the day after, it continued. Every morning, Cooper took his place near the backpack. Every evening he returned to it. He never chewed it, never pawed at it, never tried to open it himself. He just watched, like the bag was alive. Sarah started to notice the smaller things. The way Cooper's ears lifted when she reached for the zipper, even from another room. The way his body leaned subtly forward when the bag shifted. The way he relaxed only when it stayed still. It wasn't obsession. It was duty. One afternoon, she caught herself standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him. You act like it's going to walk away, she said. Cooper's tail thumped once, slow, thoughtful. She laughed softly. You're ridiculous. But the laugh didn't settle her. She began checking the backpack before bed. Not opening it, just making sure it was there, where Cooper expected it to be. The habit crept in quietly. A few days later, her sister came by. Why's your dog guarding a bag? Emily asked, setting her coat down. He's being weird, Sarah said. I think he smells something. Emily raised an eyebrow. In a backpack? Cooper glanced at Emily, polite, calm, then turned back to the bag. That's not normal weird, Emily added. Sarah shrugged. He's old. Maybe he's just attached. But that night, Sarah dreamed of standing in a crowded room, calling Cooper's name while he stared past her, focused on something she couldn't see. She woke with her heart racing. The following morning, rain tapped gently against the windows. The house smelled like wet pavement and coffee. Sarah picked up the backpack. Cooper stood instantly. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He just stepped closer, blocking her path. Okay, she whispered. I hear you. She set the bag down. Cooper exhaled, a long relieved breath, and sat. Sarah knelt in front of him, resting her forehead briefly against his. You've been watching this thing every day, she said quietly. What do you know that I don't? Cooper licked her cheek once. Gentle, grateful. She stayed there for a moment longer than necessary, hand resting on his neck, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. Whatever this was, it wasn't going away. And deep down, beneath the logic and routine and explanations, Sarah felt it too. The sense that something important had been waiting, patiently, right there in the open. Sarah tried to reason her way out of it. That's what she told herself anyway. Dogs fixate. Dogs develop habits. Dogs sense things humans can't, but not everything means something. She repeated those thoughts as she tied her shoes that morning, Cooper already positioned near the backpack like it was his assigned post. Rain clouds hung low outside, turning the light in the house a dull gray. The kind of morning that made everything feel heavier than it should. All right, she said, forcing a brighter tone. Enough. She picked up the backpack. Cooper stood immediately. His ears pinned back this time. His body stiffened. Not aggressive, not panicked, just braced. Cooper, she said, firmer now. Stop. She took one step toward the door. He followed, blocking her again. Her patience thinned. I don't have time for this, she muttered. She stepped around him. Cooper let out a soft sound. Not a bark, not a whine. Something low and uncertain that stopped her mid-stride. He circled back in front of her, moving carefully, deliberately, like he was afraid of doing the wrong thing but more afraid of letting her pass. Sarah exhaled sharply. You're being dramatic, she said. Cooper sat, but his eyes stayed locked on her face, searching. That look, that quiet intensity, made her chest tighten in a way she didn't want to examine. She opened the door and stepped out without the backpack. Cooper didn't follow right away. He looked back at the bag, then at her, then slowly padded outside, glancing over his shoulder until the door closed. The day dragged. Sarah found herself distracted in meetings, her thoughts drifting back to the kitchen, to the backpack leaning against the wall, to Cooper's stillness, the way he hadn't relaxed even after she left. At lunch she called the vet. Behavior changes at his age aren't uncommon, the receptionist said kindly. If there's no aggression or distress, it's usually nothing urgent. Nothing urgent. That phrase followed her home. When she opened the door that evening, Cooper greeted her with his usual gentle enthusiasm, tail wagging, head bumping into her leg. Normal. Happy. Relief washed over her. See, she told herself. He's fine. Then he turned, walked straight past her, and sat in front of the backpack. Sarah dropped her bag. Unbelievable. She watched him for a long moment. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock and the faint sound of traffic outside. Cooper didn't move. "You're acting like there's a bomb in there," she said, half joking. Cooper's ears twitched. That night, she zipped the backpack shut and slid it into the hall closet. She felt ridiculous doing it. Like she was indulging a superstition, but she needed space. Needed normal back. She closed the closet door, turned, and nearly tripped over Cooper. He sat directly in front of it. Still. Alert. Waiting. Sarah stared at him. "Oh no," she whispered. "Don't you start that." Cooper lowered his head slightly. His tail rested flat on the floor. His posture wasn't defiant. It was pleading. "I can't live like this," she said softly, rubbing her face. "You understand that, right?" Cooper stood and pressed his nose gently to the closet door. Just once. Then he sat again. Sarah's frustration bubbled over, quiet, contained, edged with exhaustion. "You're fine," she said. "You're safe. There's nothing in there." She opened the closet, grabbed the backpack and placed it back by the door. Cooper relaxed instantly. His shoulders softened. His breathing slowed. He lay down beside it, chin resting on the fabric like a pillow. Sarah sank onto the couch, suddenly drained. "This is not healthy," she murmured. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Over the next few days she tried everything. She moved the backpack to different rooms, changed its position, left it in the car overnight. Each time Cooper adjusted. He found it. He sat near it. He watched. Once she caught him nudging it with his nose when he thought she wasn't looking, just enough to reposition it closer to where she could see it. She scolded him gently. "Leave it," she said. He obeyed. But the concern never left his eyes. Friends noticed. "He seems serious," Emily said during another visit. "Like he's working." Sarah laughed weakly. "I think he's losing it." Emily didn't smile. Dogs don't usually lose it quietly. That night, Sarah lay awake listening to Cooper breathe at the foot of the bed. The backpack rested against the dresser, exactly where he could see it. She tried to remember what was inside. Old paperwork. A jacket. Things she didn't want to think about. Nothing important. Nothing dangerous. And yet, she thought about the way Cooper had placed his paw on her wrist that first morning. The care and the movement. The trust. Not fear. Not panic. A warning. Misread. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the dark, unsure if she meant it for Cooper or herself. Cooper's tail thumped once against the floor. Slow. Gentle. Like he was saying, "It's okay. I'll keep watching." The signs didn't grow louder. They grew steadier. That was what unsettled Sarah the most. If Cooper had barked nonstop, if he had panicked, if he had torn at the backpack like something inside was trying to get out, she could have dismissed it. But he didn't. Instead, he became consistent. Every morning, Cooper took his place beside the bag before she even reached the kitchen. By the time the kettle clicked off, he was already there. Sitting upright, eyes focused, ears alert. Not tense. Ready. Sarah started waking up earlier without realizing it. She'd lie in bed listening, waiting for the sound of his paws on the floor. The moment she heard him move, she felt it, that quiet pressure in her chest. Here we go again. One morning she decided to test him. She picked up the backpack and carried it toward the front door. Cooper stood immediately. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He walked in front of her, slow, measured, and stopped. Sarah halted. They stood there facing each other, the house silent around them. Morning light stretched across the floor between them like a line neither of them wanted to cross. "You're serious about this," she said softly. Cooper's ears flicked forward. She took another step. He shifted too, staying directly in her path. Not touching her. Not pushing. Just refusing to move aside. Sarah swallowed. Her hand tightened on the strap. The backpack felt heavier than it should have. Or maybe that was just her imagination, her nerves finally catching up. She lowered it back to the floor. Cooper relaxed instantly. His shoulders softened. His breathing evened out. He sat calm again. Sarah stared at him. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." She didn't take it with her that day. Or the next. She told herself it didn't matter. She didn't need it. Whatever was inside could wait. Life went on just fine without it. But the signs followed her anyway. Cooper began positioning himself between her and the door whenever the backpack was nearby. If she stood too close to it for too long, he'd rise and gently insert himself beside her leg. If she ignored him, he'd sit, staring up at her with that same steady gaze. Not fear. Expectation. One afternoon Sarah tried to clean. She vacuumed the living room, moved furniture, opened windows to let in fresh air. The house filled with the smell of soap and dust and early autumn breeze. The backpack sat on the couch. She reached for it. Cooper appeared instantly. He didn't touch her this time. He sat directly in front of the couch, blocking access with his body. "Cooper," she sighed. "I just need to move it." He tilted his head slightly, listening. She waited. Nothing changed. Her frustration flared, sharp and sudden. "This is ridiculous," she said, louder than she meant to. "You're fine. I'm fine. Everything is fine." Cooper's ears folded back. He didn't retreat. He stayed. That was when she noticed it, the tremor. Subtle. Almost invisible. His front legs shook just slightly, like he was holding something in. The anger drained out of her instantly. She dropped her gaze. "I didn't mean that," she murmured. She moved the vacuum instead. That night rain returned. Not heavy. Just steady enough to fill the air with sound. Sarah sat on the couch scrolling aimlessly on her phone while Cooper lay beside the backpack, chin resting against it. Every so often he'd lift his head and sniff the air, then settle again. Watching. Waiting. "What do you smell?" she asked quietly. Cooper's tail thumped once. She leaned back and closed her eyes. Memories surfaced uninvited. Hospital hallways. The clean sting of antiseptic. The weight of a bag like that one resting against her leg, while she waited for news she wasn't ready to hear. She opened her eyes quickly. No, that wasn't it. That was years ago. She hadn't touched those memories in a long time, and she didn't plan to now. Cooper shifted beside her, placed his head gently on her knee. The warmth grounded her. "I know," she whispered. "I know you're trying to help. But help with what?" The signs escalated in small ways. Cooper started waking her at night. Not whining, not barking. Just standing beside the bed, staring at her until she opened her eyes. Then he'd turn his head toward the backpack. Once she sat up and looked at it, he'd lie back down. Satisfied. Sarah stopped sleeping through the night. She began keeping the lights on longer, leaving the TV playing softly for background noise. The house felt different now, like it was holding its breath. Emily called one evening. "You sound tired," her sister said. "I am." "Is it the dog thing?" Sarah hesitated. "He won't stop." Emily was quiet for a moment. "Then maybe he shouldn't." Sarah rubbed her temple. "You're starting to sound like him." "Good," Emily said gently. "Because someone's trying to tell you something." After the call, Sarah sat on the floor across from Cooper. They looked at each other for a long moment. You're not wrong, she said softly. Are you? Cooper leaned forward, pressed his nose lightly against the backpack, then looked back at her. Her chest tightened. The signs weren't stopping, because they didn't need to. They were already clear. Sarah just hadn't been ready to listen yet. But something was shifting. Slowly, quietly. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that the next time she reached for that zipper, she wouldn't be able to turn away. The house was quiet in a different way that morning. Not empty but expectant. Rain had washed the air clean overnight, leaving the windows fogged and the light outside soft and pale. Sarah stood barefoot in the kitchen, coffee cooling in her mug, listening to Cooper's steady breathing behind her. He was already there, sitting beside the backpack, waiting. She didn't sigh this time, didn't argue, didn't tell herself she was imagining things. She just nodded. All right, she said quietly. I'm ready. Cooper's ears lifted. That was all. Sarah knelt slowly, careful with her movements, like the moment itself might break if she rushed it. The backpack looked ordinary. Faded canvas, frayed seams, a small stain near the bottom she didn't remember making. Her fingers brushed the zipper. Cooper leaned forward, not touching her, just close enough to feel his warmth. She paused. The smell came back again. Faint, clean, unmistakable now. Antiseptic. Hospitals. Her throat tightened. I forgot about you, she whispered, not to Cooper but to the bag. She pulled the zipper open. Slowly. The sound filled the room, soft, metallic, final. Inside were papers, neatly stacked, folded more carefully than she remembered. Hospital discharge forms. Appointment cards. A pale blue wristband tucked into the side pocket, its edges worn from being handled too many times. Sarah's hands trembled. She hadn't seen these in years. She reached deeper. Her fingers closed around fabric. Tiny. She lifted it out. A baby hat. Soft cotton. White with faint yellow stars. Still folded the way the nurse had handed it to her, back when folding things felt like the only control she had left. Her breath caught. Oh, she whispered. The room tilted slightly. Not dizzy, just distant. Like she was suddenly standing in two moments at once. The present kitchen. And a quiet hospital room filled with machines that hummed instead of spoke. She hadn't planned to keep it. She just hadn't known how to let it go. Cooper sat perfectly still, watching her. She pulled out the rest. An ultrasound photo in a cracked plastic sleeve. A card with a pressed flower taped to the front, from a nurse who'd written, "You are stronger than you know." Sarah pressed the heel of her hand against her mouth. She hadn't cried that day. Not really. She'd packed everything into the backpack instead. Closed the zipper. Told herself she'd deal with it later. Later had turned into years. Cooper shifted closer. He lowered his head onto her knee. The contact broke something open. Tears came quietly at first, warm, steady, unhurried. They fell onto the papers, onto the tiny hat, onto the floor she hadn't noticed shaking beneath her. I didn't mean to forget, she said, voice thin. I just didn't know how to remember. Cooper's tail moved once. Slow. Understanding. She realized then what he'd been doing. Not guarding the backpack from danger. Guarding her from silence. From the weight of something unfinished. He'd smelled it. The hospital, the sorrow, the love that never got a place to land. Dogs didn't understand loss the way humans did, but they understood grief. They understood when something hurt quietly for too long. She gathered the items into her lap. Let herself feel them. The love. The softness she'd locked away to keep functioning. Cooper stayed with her the entire time. He didn't lick her tears. Didn't paw at her hands. He just stayed close. Grounded. Present. After a while, she wasn't sure how long the crying eased. The tightness in her chest loosened into something gentler. Sad still. But warm. She took a deep breath. The house felt lighter. I think you knew, she said softly, running her fingers through Cooper's fur. Didn't you? His eyes met hers. Calm. Certain. She laughed. A quiet, broken sound that surprised her. Of course you did. She repacked the backpack carefully this time, not hiding the items, just placing them back with intention. When she zipped it closed, Cooper didn't react. No tension, no urgency, just a slow blink. Sarah sat back on her heels. For the first time in days, the room felt still, truly still. Not waiting, not holding its breath. She rested her forehead briefly against the backpack. "Thank you," she whispered. Cooper leaned in and pressed his shoulder against her. Solid. Real. The backpack stayed by the wall that day. Open. Unthreatening. And Cooper, his job finally done, curled up nearby and fell asleep, watching no more. Because what needed to be seen finally had been. The quiet that followed felt earned. Not empty, not fragile. Earned. Sarah moved through the house slowly that day, like she was learning its shape again. The backpack remained where she'd left it, unzipped. Its contents no longer hidden but no longer heavy either. Light filtered through the windows in a warmer way now, touching corners she hadn't noticed before. Cooper slept most of the morning. Deep sleep. The kind that softened his paws and loosened his jaw. Every so often, his tail gave a small twitch, not alarmed, just drifting. Sarah watched him from the kitchen table. "You must be exhausted," she murmured. He'd been carrying something for her. She saw that now. Later, she gathered the backpack and set it gently on the table. She didn't rush. Didn't brace herself. She simply opened it again, calm, steady, and took the items out one by one. The papers went into a folder. The cards into a small wooden box. The tiny hat stayed in her hands a little longer. She pressed it to her chest. "I should have done this sooner," she said aloud. Cooper lifted his head at the sound of her voice. He stood, walked over, and sat beside her chair. No urgency this time. No guarding. Just companionship. She smiled and reached down, scratching behind his ears. "I'm okay," she told him. "You can rest." He did. That afternoon, Sarah made a phone call she'd avoided for years. The clinic answered on the second ring. She spoke calmly, asked simple questions, scheduled an appointment she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. Not because she needed treatment, but because she needed closure. When she hung up, her hands shook. Cooper noticed immediately. He stood and leaned against her leg, steady, reassuring weight. "I know," she whispered. "Me too." The next morning, she picked up the backpack again. Cooper watched, relaxed. No movement. No concern. She slung it over her shoulder. Nothing happened. She paused, heart pounding. Cooper wagged his tail once. That was it. They walked out together. The clinic smelled exactly the way she remembered. Clean. Sharp. Too bright. Sarah's breath shortened as soon as she stepped inside. Her chest tightened, instinctively, automatically, like her body remembered before her mind could catch up. Cooper pressed close. His head brushed her knee. She inhaled. Slow. Deep. The appointment wasn't long. Just conversation. Gentle acknowledgement. A chance to say things out loud that had lived quietly in her for too long. She cried. But she didn't fall apart. When they left, the air outside felt different. Warmer. Lighter. Like the world had widened just a little. At home, Sarah placed the backpack in the closet. Not hidden, not guarded, simply stored. Cooper didn't follow it. He stretched out on the living room rug instead, rolling slightly onto his side, exposing his belly to the afternoon sun. She laughed. "There you are," she said. The rescue didn't look the way she would have expected. There was no dramatic moment. No sudden relief. Just a gradual return to herself. She started sleeping through the night again. The house stopped feeling watchful. The air felt breathable. Cooper changed too. He became lighter. More playful, more relaxed. He still followed her from room to room. Still watched the door when strangers passed outside. Still nudged her hand when she drifted too far into thought. But the intensity was gone. One evening, Sarah sat on the floor sorting through old photos. Cooper lay beside her, chin resting on her thigh. She found a picture she'd forgotten. A younger version of herself, smiling softly, holding Cooper as a puppy. You've always been like this, she said. Watching. Waiting. Cooper huffed quietly. She set the photo aside and rested her forehead against his. You rescued me, she whispered. He licked her nose once. Gentle. As if to say that was never the point. The rescue hadn't been about saving her from pain. It had been about bringing her back to it safely. Allowing her to feel what she'd set aside in order to survive. Letting the love go somewhere instead of staying locked in a bag by the door. That night, Sarah placed the baby hat into the wooden box and set it on a shelf where sunlight reached in the morning. Not as a wound. As a memory. A real one. She turned off the light. Cooper curled up beside the bed. The house settled around them, whole, quiet, at peace. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt like they had to keep watch anymore. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in ordinary moments. Quiet ones. Sarah noticed it first in the mornings. The way she woke without the familiar tightness in her chest. The way the light through the window felt less intrusive, softer somehow. Like it was allowed to be there now. Cooper stretched beside the bed, paws pushing against the blanket, tail thumping once before he rolled onto his side. Good morning, she said. He blinked slowly. Content. The backpack stayed in the closet. Sometimes the door was open. Sometimes it wasn't. Either way, Cooper didn't check. He didn't position himself. He didn't watch. Whatever job he'd been doing, it was finished. Sarah began small. She returned to routine she'd quietly abandoned over the years. Morning walks that turned into longer ones. Cooking real meals instead of reheating whatever was easiest. Sitting on the porch in the evenings, listening to the neighborhood settle. Cooper was always with her. But now he walked a half step behind instead of ahead. His leash loose. His posture easy. Trusting. One afternoon, Sarah took the wooden box down from the shelf. Sunlight fell across it, warming the smooth surface. Cooper lifted his head from the rug, watching her. Not alert, just aware. She sat on the floor and opened the lid. Inside, everything rested neatly. The cards. The folded papers. The baby hat. Her breath caught, but only briefly. The pain was still there. She knew it would always be. But it had softened around the edges, like something handled gently instead of avoided. She picked up the hat. This mattered, she said aloud. Even if it didn't last. Cooper stood and walked over. He sat beside her, shoulder touching hers. She stayed there for a while. Not crying, not pushing the feeling away, just letting it exist. Letting it have its place. That was new. Later that week, Sarah did something she hadn't expected herself to do. She planted flowers. Nothing elaborate. Just a small patch near the fence, soil turned by hand, dirt under her nails. Cooper supervised from the grass, nose twitching as the scent of earth filled the air. What do you think? She asked him. He wagged his tail. When she finished, she stood back and looked at it. The uneven rows, the bright promise of something growing. Felt right. Healing didn't erase what had been hidden. It integrated it. At night she slept deeper. Dreams still came, sometimes of hospital halls, sometimes of quiet rooms filled with light, but they no longer jolted her awake. When she stirred, Cooper shifted closer without opening his eyes. A presence. Not a protector. Partner. One evening Emily came by again. You look different, her sister said, setting her coat down. Sarah smiled. I feel different. Emily glanced around the house. Did the dog finally give you permission to live again? Cooper lifted his head at that, tail wagging once. Sarah laughed softly. Something like that. They sat together on the couch talking about ordinary things. Work. Neighbors. A show Emily had been watching. Cooper lay at Sarah's feet, belly up, fully relaxed. Emily watched him for a moment. He seems lighter. He is, Sarah said. We both are. Later, after Emily left, Sarah stood by the window watching dusk settle over the street. The flowers near the fence caught the last of the light. Cooper came to stand beside her. You knew before I did, she said quietly. Didn't you? He leaned against her leg. Not answering. not denying. She reached down and rested her hand on his head. Healing wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself. It showed up in the way she could open the wooden box without bracing. In the way she could speak about what she'd lost without feeling like she might shatter. In the way love no longer felt dangerous. She realized then that Cooper hadn't been guarding the backpack because of what was inside. He'd been guarding her because of what wasn't. The space where grief had been sealed away. The place where love had nowhere to go. Now it did. That night, Sarah left the bedroom door open. Moonlight spilled across the floor. The house breathed quietly around them. Cooper circled once before lying down, sighing deeply as he settled. Sarah listened to the sound. Steady. Peaceful. She closed her eyes. Some things would always stay with her. But they no longer hid in the dark. They lived where they belonged. In the open, in the light. In the quiet understanding between a woman and the dog who had waited as long as it took. The change didn't announce itself. Settled in. Like dust after a long journey finally finding a place to rest. Sarah noticed it one morning when she reached for her keys and didn't feel that familiar hesitation, the half-second pause where her chest used to tighten for no clear reason. She slipped on her shoes, glanced around the house and smiled. Cooper waited by the door. Relaxed. Tail moving slowly, easily. Ready? She asked. He stood and stretched, back legs extending, mouth opening in a long, satisfied yawn. They stepped outside together. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet grass and distant coffee from a neighbor's porch. The street was quiet, a few cars passing, birds settling into trees. Nothing remarkable, and yet everything felt different. They walked without hurry. Cooper sniffed along the fence line, paused to inspect a mailbox, then looked back at Sarah, checking in, not guarding. She met his gaze. "I'm here," she said. He wagged his tail and moved on. That was how it was now. Not watchful. Not tense. Connected. The days that followed carried that same ease. Sarah laughed more. Not loudly, not performatively, just naturally. She caught herself humming while cooking. Sitting longer with her coffee in the mornings. Letting silence exist without needing to fill it. The backpack stayed in the closet. Sometimes she opened it. Sometimes she didn't. It no longer demanded anything from her. Neither did Cooper. And yet he stayed close, always aware, always attuned. When she grew quiet, he noticed. When her shoulders tightened, he nudged her hand. When she smiled, he leaned into her leg like it was the most natural thing in the world. One afternoon, Sarah took Cooper to the park they hadn't visited in years. The trees were taller than she remembered. The path more worn. Children played near the swings. Laughter drifting across the grass like something light and hopeful. Cooper trotted ahead, leash loose, ears perked. Sarah sat on a bench and watched him explore. He was older now, slower, but still solid, still present. She realized then that the bond between them had shifted, deepened into something quieter and stronger. It wasn't built on protection anymore. It was built on trust, on the understanding that neither of them had to carry things alone. A woman and her dog, not because one saved the other, but because they listened when it mattered. When Cooper returned and rested his head against her knee, she placed her hand on his neck and closed her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. He sighed, long and content, and settled at her feet. The sun dipped lower, warming the tops of the trees. The world moved on around them, unaware of the small, profound peace that had been earned here. Later that night, Sarah placed the wooden box back on its shelf. Not hidden, not heavy, just there. She turned off the light and climbed into bed. Cooper curled up beside her, close enough that she could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. The house was quiet, not watchful, not waiting, whole. Sarah stared up at the ceiling for a moment, then smiled softly into the dark. Some bonds aren't loud. They don't announce themselves. They show up, day after day, patient, intuitive, unwavering. They wait until you're ready. And when you finally are, they don't need to guard you anymore. They simply stay, right where they belong.